Hello, A Taste of AZ listeners. Today we are in Pine at Old County Inn, but we might as well be in heaven or Nirvana or whatever you want to call it, because not only is this an epic room, but I've got a beer poured in front of me and some pizza on the way after we do this podcast. Our guest, why don't you introduce yourself?
I must say, too, we're starting off on the right footstep. You actually said county inn instead of country inn. So
yeah.
Bravo. Thank you.
Well, when we were talking on the phone, just as I was coming up and connecting, I misspoke for a second and said Old Country Inn.
It's kind of our running joke. It's funny. Everyone actually just goes to it automatically, just in your brain, think country.
Yeah.
But the actual road right here is Old County Inn. But anyhow, so I am. My name is Michael Dahling, and I'm the owner and proprietor, I guess, of Old County Inn. We did start the place, so I pride myself on being a chef, and I'm sure we'll get into the rest of that story. But that's who I am.
Well, and you don't have like a lot of the fine dining chefs or things like that have like a certain kind of vibe about them, but you have a vibe of someone that would live up here and shovel rocks and repair chairs, as you've already been doing today, right? So what is it like coming from a chef background to actually running an operation and running a business?
Yeah, so I'll just give you a brief background history of myself.
Do.
I'm from New York City originally, and I did graduate the Culinary Institute of America long time ago. I won't date myself, but it was right around like 1996 or so. Pretty much got out of high school, went to college for 6 months, and I was like, you know what? I had a couple of options. It was like become a cop, a fireman, or do something else. So I wanted to become a chef and went to culinary school. The whole cop and fireman thing is just most of my family back east. My father's a cop, my brother, but so
which
I had
you'll see a lot
options.
of the memorabilia around here, right?
Exactly. Yep. So we'll get into all that too. So, so we'll get into highlight the tap room and everything that we're sitting in. But I did go to the Culinary Institute of America. Mm-hmm. Then I graduated there, and then I also got a scholarship to go to Italy. So I went to the Italian Culinary Institute for Foreigners in Torino, Italy, for about a year, and then got out of culinary school, worked at some resorts, and then migrated out west.
So I feel like I have an idea of why you started cooking pizza then, at least here. But what was it that drew you specifically to Italy? Was it just an opportunity that brought you out there?
It's funny. People say, how do you start cooking? And then Italy, but no offense to my mother, but my mother never cooked, so I always had a fed for myself. It was funny. We still joke that my mother, God bless her, she's an Irish Catholic, but she loves the microwave, so I must say that. But I did, so going to the Culinary Institute of America, I just kind of fell into it when, right before we graduated. I was downstairs at one of the alumni office, and they had a sign on the wall, and there was a restaurateur named Tony May, who just recently passed away this year. Awesome guy, and he's a huge pioneer in Italian cuisine, all of the United States, in Italy, but most of his restaurant, San Domenico, was in Manhattan. So he put together a program where they took 30 chefs from the United States and gave them a full ride to this brand new school that was in Torino, Italian Culinary Institute for Foreigners. And luckily, I applied for it, and I was lucky to be one of the chefs there. So kind of just fell into it, and we went to Italy, went to school for about 3 or 4 months, and then you had to do an internship. And I wound up working in Florence, a few other towns. We traveled through tons of little cities and met, a ton of people, and it was kind of cool being with 30 American chefs. And then I landed in a little town called Calvisano, which is in Brescia, which, by the way, that was 20-something years ago. My wife and I and my son just went there a couple months ago. Went back to the restaurant. It was an awesome experience. So
that's got to be a real full circle moment, huh?
Yep. Yeah, it was awesome.
So what brought you into cooking in the first place?
So, growing up in New York City, my like I think I explained earlier, my father was a cop in New York's NYPD. My brother got on really, really young. So God bless my brother. He just celebrated his 30 years on the force. He's a lieutenant with the Anti-Terrorism Task Force in Manhattan.
Wow.
So long time. So he'll probably retire soon. But I started cooking. My uncle had a little butcher shop, and it was like a delicatessen butcher shop back on Highland Boulevard, which is in Staten Island, one of the big avenues. And I started working in there as a young kid, like 14, 15 years old, cutting meat, making meatballs, lasagna, all the pasta stuff, working with the bakers and the butchers. And then, I just kind of fell in love with the cooking aspect. And then my parents, naturally they wanted me to become a police officer, because it's like, oh, you become a cop, you do your 30 years, you get your pension, and you move to Florida like the rest of us. But, I went a different direction. I actually had one of my neighbors, his older brother, went to the Culinary Institute of America, and he worked for a really good restaurant in Manhattan. And so we actually took a day trip up there one day and just looked at the school. And, when you're a 19-year-old kid, I think it was at the time, and I don't know if you've ever been to the Culinary Institute of America. No. It's up on it's a beautiful location. It's an old monastery. It's right up on the Hudson River. And it looks like a ancient castle, and it's
Really,
it's like the mecca for culinary cuisine.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
I went up there and just fell in love with the school and was lucky enough to attend it. My parents helped me out a little bit, and then got some financial aid when there, and it's a 2-year program. So, and then I did do an internship in Key West, Florida, down in the Keys. So,
Okay.
you go to school for a year, 6 months internship, and then you go back, finish school, and then typically you'd go out into the workforce.
That's a pretty cool program.
Pretty cool, yeah.
Because not only do you get to go and get pushed into something, but like for me, I do photography and stuff like that, right? But I never went to school for it. So I don't have like, at least in the beginning, I didn't have the structure of learning a typical, college route, going to film school or whatever, and then doing photography on my own. But be able for you to do school, go work in that environment, and then go back and kind of reapply and relearn and refocus on it. That seems like it was probably be a really good starting out point for getting into the industry.
Exactly, yeah. And when you go to, I always tell people culinary school kind of gives you that basic fundamentals. But when you go to a place like Johnson Wales or the Culinary Institute of America, you're like immersed in it. So you're living in a dorm typically there, and you're at this beautiful location, and you're taking your classes, and you have some of the best chefs from all over the world. So it's just like you're totally immersed in that for 2 years while you're there. But,
and surrounded by other people that have kind of the same goal and passion as you. Like when you go to a regular college, there's 50 other degrees or whatever it may be. But when you go to Culinary Institute, you're surrounded by people that have a very similar mission, whatever their spin on it is, huh?
Yeah, and so many like legends, like Anthony Bourdain went there. You see all these Tom Kalicki, like a ton of chefs you see on the Food Network now. Bobby Flay, they all graduated from there. I must say, it was weird. I think when I got in the 90s, obviously my father wanted me to go one direction. He remember telling me, he's like, you got to be crazy. You're going to be working 100 hours a week. You're not going to make any money. He's like, why would you want to become a chef and this and that? And I kind of got in right before the whole era of, watching the Food Network and all the shows. So it was weird. So like you think you had a few years, then the Food Network really popped, and then it seemed like everyone wanted to get in to become a chef. Everyone started getting tattooed up, and it was like this renegade life. And then COVID hit, and then now you barely see anyone from culinary school. It's like literally, I don't think I've had maybe 2 people from culinary school come up here to work in the last 6 years.
Wow.
It's I don't know. I think a lot of people now are just more into the whole social media thing, influencers and bloggers and stuff too. It's like I think cooking's almost like a dying. So hopefully we'll have its rejuvenation come back around. But
and like when I said earlier, fine dining chefs or just chefs in general, really, but people that are more not necessarily just kind of flipping burgers, whatever. Nothing wrong with that, but people that are really passionate about it and it's driving them. They have like an artist vibe about them, if you will, which. Business owner is one cap, and there's definitely an artistry to it, but it's not as much of an art as, plating a beautiful plate or coming up with menu concoctions and things like that. But from where you started, that sounds like it was a very big thing of yours, was the passion behind it.
Exactly, yeah. And then, then you get out, and then you have the reality settle in. So you get out of culinary school, and then you're like, wow, I'm going to be the top chef. And then you get out, and then you go somewhere, and the guy's like, all right, go peel some carrots, and then we're going to pay you minimum wage, and you're working 60, 70 hours. So you definitely got to put your dues in. So I did that whole grinding thing. Like I worked at the Phoenician for a while, and then I got in some other private restaurants and so forth. And then, I did that whole restaurant syndicate for 15 years or so. And then, your body starts taking a toll, and you get a little burnt out. And then I had some friends that got into the food service side of it. So I went to work as a chef for like a food brokerage for like a few years. And then Cisco Foods took a liking to me. And Cisco Foods is like one of the bigger distributors in the whole world now. Yeah. And they gave me the opportunity. So I was one of their corporate chefs for Arizona for almost 6 to 7 years around there. And that was a killer job. We had a whole test kitchen at our corporate office out there on the west side. And my job was literally to work with our sales staff and to go to all different restaurants throughout the whole entire state. Almost like a specialist. You go in there with the salespeople, and sometimes you'll stay there for 2 days, helping them design their menu, cutting meat, going over food costs, labor. So I kind of got to do the whole teaching side of it, and it was a great job. Like I have friends now from anywhere from Bisbee to Sedona, down near Mexico, the Grand Canyon. So I met a ton of people. So I did that for about 7 years, and then Shamrock Foods kind of offered me the similar position. So I left Cisco, went to Shamrock, which is another huge distributor.
Kind of does a very similar thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and Shamrock's more of a family-owned business where both great companies, just both very similar. At the end of the day, we always say you're going to kind of get similar products. You're really buying from your salesperson and which company delivers the best and that stuff. But so I did the same thing for about 5 years, and then kind of got the itch again to open my own place. So, we'll get into that, I'm sure. But so I came from the wholesale side, and that was a great job and ton of experience just working with products, seeing, every week I'm working with 20 to 30 different customers kind of, and I can't, you're out there watching them saying, oh, they're doing this right, this wrong. So it was a good opportunity to kind of take some mental notes and see if I ever did dive back into the restaurant scene again, like, what to do and what not to do.
Well, so bringing it back a little bit, when you are traveling Italy, are you, seeing the vision in the future of someday I want to own a restaurant, not just cook at a restaurant, but own a restaurant? Is that in your mind at that point?
Yes. Yeah. And that back then I was, early, I think I was like 20 years old, 21. And I did, when I did come back out to Arizona, I did kind of get into, more of a private restaurant for 3-4 years. It was more Italian food and that sort of a menu. And then went back east for a while, and I was working in Atlantic City, New Jersey, similar to the restaurant scene. But it definitely was my passion when I got out of culinary school. It was like, someday I want to have my own restaurant and do that. And then, I think being 20, 21 at the time, I was partners in a restaurant, and I think you have the culinary drive, but you're still out there partying, and I think you're not mature enough at that age.
Sure.
Certain people could probably pull it off, but it was a good experience and kind of humbling, when you're younger, because you get out there, then reality kicks in, and then you're kicked in the teeth a few times. And
sure.
Yeah, so you make some bad decisions, good smart business decisions, and working those long hours and stuff too. So I did that for 3 or 4 years, and then kind of got back into the food sales side and more of resort sides of it. So yeah, to answer your question.
Well, and so it sounds like when you were working at Cisco and Shamrock, you are not running a business, but you're almost trying to help people optimize their business, at least on the food sourcing side of things. Is that a correct kind of explanation of at least what it would look like?
Yep.
And so you're getting, opportunities to, by proxy, if you will, run a business, but not necessarily have to have the day-to-day things of, like you have today, a pile of rocks out there that you got to go push aside because you got a big concert coming up.
We always tell people it's like it's easier to teach people than actually do it sometimes. And
sure.
I don't know what that old joke was like. If you're a teacher, it's like someone that couldn't do it or something.
Yeah.
But it's now looking back on it, when you're coming, a lot of times I'd walk into a restaurant with my pristine chef jacket, and they're like, "Oh, Chef Mike's here from Cisco or Shamrock," and you're walking into this busy restaurant, and now thinking back at it, they're probably like, "What is this guy doing here? Get out of my way! I'm trying to trying to prep or cook." But it was definitely a good, different set of eyes looking back at it from back then. So I think it was just a whole different ball game. I'm out there teaching people, and you have a little more time to do it. But yeah, like you said, now it's like owning a restaurant. Especially in this day and age, it's like every day someone doesn't show up, someone's quitting, something's breaking. You see me walk in here and I'm fixing a chair. Just, they lost the keys to the other restaurant. I got a pile of rock out here I have to go shovel. That's more of being a small business owner. So that's, we'll get into that too. But, now I think owning a couple of businesses and doing this well, I think when you're more of a landlord / restaurateur, now cooking's like 10-15% of the day, and now you're filled with all this other stuff, book work and HR work, and it's a lot goes into it.
Well, and it's interesting too because I understand the idea behind the phrase of, what do they say, like you were saying, the phrase of those who can do, and those who can't teach, I think is the joke of the phrase. But if there's any way for you to learn how the hell to do something, it's to be put in a position where you have to teach other people how to do it. And especially business owners who have no time for bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Like if I came in here and was trying to tell you how to do something better, and you knew everything I was saying, you'd probably be like, dude, I don't have time for this. I to go scoop some rocks right now.
Now looking back out of it, if I ever got back, say you were semi-retired down the road and you're doing something like that again, I would also, I'd definitely take that into consideration, the lack of time you have when you're a small business owner.
Sure.
It's definitely a lot of moving. So if you get too much into it, sometimes it sounds good in theory, but it's like, yeah, I'd love to sit down in my office and crunch numbers all day. But the reality is the line cook didn't show, and I got someone else that didn't come in that day. So you're always, juggling a lot of things. But, so, I don't know how far along we were going to get into how Old County came up, but working back at Cisco and Shamrock. So when I bought a little cabin up here in Pine and Strawberry, going back 15 years ago.
Wow. And
this is back when I was working still at Cisco Foods, and I would come up here on the weekends, and it's literally right down the street here from Old County, and it's just a 2-bedroom little cottage, 900 square feet. And then, I kept walking by this property, and this is back when the whole real estate market crashed. So you're looking at 2007, 2008 or so. And this lot that we're sitting on now was pretty much empty. And I kept coming by here. And then later on, I met my wife at the time. We were just dating, and I had my 2 dogs. It was funny. I had 2 Doberman pinchers, and my wife was there. She'd come up, we'd hang out, and I'd walk my 2 dogs by her. And I met this old timer. His name was Bill. He's still alive. And I kept talking to him, and he was like, "Man, I have this property for sale. No one's buying anything. The whole real estate market's a mess." And I started talking to him a little bit and gave him my phone number. About a week later, he calls me and he's like, "You know what, kid? I'm going to give you the best deal of your life." He's like, "If no one has any money up here, and I'll give you a killer offer on this property." So I thought about it for a few days, and then we weren't even married at the time, my wife and I now. We talked about it. I came in, gave him an offer. He took it. Next thing you know, I remember signing the paperwork. I'm like, "I think we just bought that lot up the street." And she's like, "What are you going to put on there?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Someday we'll put some kind of restaurant or an inn or something, right?" And so
maybe a restaurant with the name Inn.
That was the whole plan of it, right? So if Old County Road is the road one right here. So you got the main Highway 87, and then you have Old County Road. That's hence the name Old County Inn, because what I envisioned getting out of the food service side was, coming up here, having 3 or 4 employees, making a few pizzas, kind of hanging out, start doing hot yoga and stuff too, and just relax. But, at the time we didn't even know what we were going to do in there. But then when I was still working, I think I was still working at Cisco at the time, and I started asking around to some of my sales guys. I was like, "Hey, I don't know what I'm going to put on this property." I have a background doing a lot of Italian food and stuff. I was like, "Is anyone selling any ovens or anything?" And at the time it was MJ and Tamiko. Tamiko's a baker in the Valley. She does pizza now too. And I think at that time they were still married, but they had this oven, it was a Woodstone oven, which we have now. And I remember going by his warehouse, and MJ's in there, and I'm like, I made him an offer for the oven. I was like, "I'll give you a couple grand for it." And he's like, first he said no. And he goes, "Listen, if you could move this thing, you could have it."
I feel like I've heard that story.
Yeah, and these ovens are heavy.
Pizza.
They weigh they're really heavy. And then not thinking about it, I called some moving company. It was, I think it was a couple of Russian guys, and they were like, "We no problem, we move it." And then they came with some little forklift thing, and I come up here, take the side of the building off. It had some just sheeting on it, because we went in and gutted everything out without knowing what we were doing there. Kind of jumped the gun. And then they call me 6 hours later, and they're like, "We can't move this thing. It's too heavy." And I remember MJ was laughing, and then finally I had to put everything back together, shut it down, call some other guy. It took 2 or 3 companies. Then finally we found the rigging company that had to pick it up, bring it up here, and then we had to have a crane. And that's kind of how Old County started. People always say, thinking it was a master brainchild. I'm like, I got a good deal on the oven. It turned out good.
So you said that the man who sold it to you told you he's going to give you the best deal you've ever had. Would you say that has stood up?
Yeah, especially now with the real estate prices up here.
Yeah.
Because, I think when he sold it to us, it was he carried the note for 10 years, and I paid it back really quick. And I remember his wife called me, and she was like, "Damn, he was counting on that interest when he goes he's in retirement." But, what the prices are now up here, it's a fraction of what.
He better be getting unlimited pizzas when he comes in.
They live up in Pine Top now. So I told him I think they've only been down once or twice, but
really?
He's getting up there in age. But if he's listening, Bill, and so thanks. You gave me the opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's got to be pretty cool for him. I mean, I don't think he would turn down, a nice wad of cash in his pocket from the appreciation. Obviously, he wanted to sell it in the first place. But to be able to see kind of the next generation evolve from something that you owned and see this in here now, that's got to be a pretty cool experience for when he can make it down
Exactly,
here.
Yeah. And, we've since we've been open, we've been blessed with a lot of business, been busy, and got some notoriety and stuff too. And a lot of people tell, you should move to Phoenix and do something down there. But I've kind of learned as I get older in life, it's great to be not only the restaurateur, but the landlord. So owning the property makes it a lot more worthwhile, because I've seen so many chefs and restaurateurs, you grind, push yourself for 20 years. And then when you want to sell your spot, you're lucky if you have a lease in there. And then sometimes if your business isn't what it was, you're going to sell it for the equipment and maybe pennies on the dollar. So I always try to tell entrepreneurs or other restaurateurs when I talk to them, it's the key, almost kind of if you read those books on McDonald's stuff, is the key is to own the real estate.
Sure.
Yeah. So if you ever, it just makes it, it's definitely makes it worthwhile as you're working down and you see you're paying down your mortgage and you own your property and own the lot. Because sometimes you go in these strip malls and you work your butt off for 20 years, and at the end of it, you're just making the landlord richer sometimes,
Sure. Well, not only that, but it's a cushion in multiple ways, right? Not only is it if you own the property, then when you have even more rough summer than normal, right? You should be able to brave that a little bit more, hopefully, as long as you've run your numbers right. And then also, I've heard stories of people building up a location for years, and a location is a major part of your brand and the experience, right? I've heard of people getting pushed out of spots that they become known for, right? They become a destination for their location, maybe even more so than their products, and then they get pushed out of that spot, and it's like, well, what do you do after that? It's almost like starting from scratch at that point.
Exactly, because if you have a 5 or 7 year lease, depends on your relationship with your landlord, right? So, but if they, if you don't have anything in writing that it can't go up a certain amount, when that 7 years is done, they could double your rent.
Yeah.
We do have a house down in Phoenix, Arcadia area, and it was like, we were just looking at a building on a corner just for giggles, I guess you would say.
Like I was looking at houses up here on Zillow the other day, and
now those prices,
it became less fun. Yeah.
Well, we were just looking at a spot down there. My wife's like, she was like, we should put an Old County down here. And then I called, and they were like, oof, the property was $3-4 million. I'm like, forget it. I'll be working there till I'm in my grave to try to pay it off. So we've been blessed up here. We kind of got in at the right time. You list the old school restaurateur people, and they always say location, location, location. I think with Old County, we hit a home run because the town at that point needed something else up here. And then we kind of got in right when the economy was turning. Have a great piece of property, as you can see right here. We're like right in the middle of the town, plenty of parking and so forth. And then just being up here in this, I think just the town was dying for something, just something to pop, right?
Sure.
Just change it a little bit. And we're not too far. We're only 2 hours from Central Phoenix.
Yeah. Well, and it's a beautiful drive up here too. It's like relaxing as long as you don't mind driving too much. It's a relaxing drive to come up here. And it's crazy. It's almost like you can see, you just look out the window 1 minute and then you look forward, look out the window again, and you can see the environment
different
changing.
Layers. Yeah,
it's crazy.
They always say that's one of the most scenic rides. So like a lot of my family comes in from New York or something, that we go on that ride, and it's like you hit desert and you start seeing the cactus, the mountains, then you start seeing the junipers, then you hit the pine. So it's a little different. And for me, I drive, I try to, it's funny, Pine used to be my R&R spot before we opened the businesses. And I used to see that sign say Pine 3 miles, and you'd have this calm feeling. Now I get anxiety when I see it. So now I go down to Phoenix 2 days just to get, I love Pine, and it's like, it's hard to relax sometimes when you have a business up here. So it's almost reversed for me now. So I'll be, if you'll catch me Monday, Tuesday doing hot yoga down there and relaxing.
Oh, yeah? Nice.
Well, I try to split it up.
It's funny too, because like, for people who work remotely, like for me, I work on my computer a lot. I'll do something similar where I'm like, okay, I'll go to Sedona or whatever it may be, and then I've got my laptop. Like, I'm not trying to work on it. I don't even want to look at it because it's basically just looking at me like, hey, you got some stuff you got to do, huh?
Exactly.
Which, like, if you're up here and you're at home or whatever, trying to relax, and something pops into your head or someone texts you, hey, a key is missing. If you're down in the valley, it's kind of like, hey, figure it out.
Like, up here, I'm like, we have a nice neighbor too, or like deep, like more in the woods of cul-de-sac. But even my wife comes up and shows up Saturday, and I'm like just pacing the house. She's like, relax, sit down. I'm like, I still can't relax. Maybe it's my personality, just being like a New Yorker. But it's funny if you talk to any of my employees, like even Brandon, he's been with me 6 years, my GM here, but he's like, I can never even picture you sitting down watching TV because I don't think you could sit still for more than like 20 minutes. It's kind of the running joke. I'm always like fixing something or.
Well, that's kind of like I'm not that like always needing to do something myself, but that's kind of like you have to have that personality a little bit to be a business owner, or you're going to get exhausted with all the little things that do pop up that you have to fix all the time. It almost like when you decide to run a business, you're almost basically saying, okay, I need to fill my life with lots of stuff that's going to stress me out and so on and so forth, but I want to do it anyways, which is a big opportunity for growth.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, it's coming from New York. It's, it's definitely a different culture. So my wife's from San Diego, and she's been out there, especially when we first started dating. If you've ever seen the sitcom Everybody Loves Raymond, that's literally my family. It's my brother's Rob, the cop. My parents are like identical to his parents, but it's just going back there. It's like my wife's from San Diego's a lot chiller, but she's like, God, you guys are old. Like everyone's paranoid. Everyone thinks everyone's out to get everyone. Sure. It's like it's funny. It's like being from New York. It's always go 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 go, and like, anything happens, it's like, you guys are yelling at each other and you're all like so strong, and just like, that's just how we are. It's crazy. And
then now you're in a place that like you were saying, you'd think it'd be a relaxing place that stuff moves a little bit slower, but not when you're doing 300 plus pizzas in a night, right?
No. And then, we have a couple other spots of town now, but it's like, sometimes most of the employees that know me, that have been with me for a while, they're like, if Mike's not saying anything, everything's good. Okay, but sometimes people will be like, God, he walks in and then he's like, that light bulb's out, the cigarette ashes. So I always tell people, I'm like, hey, I'm not trying to be like negative. I'm just kind of, you have a few minutes and my mind's always racing. So I'm like just pointing things out. And
you
like
probably don't know this, but they probably have a bell or something in there that when they know you're coming, they start ringing it, and even the guests start freaking out.
They scream, "The eagle has landed." That's what they say.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
And you know what? It's I'm in my 40s now, so I don't want to sound like one of those old people, but I think it's like I don't know if it's a generation culture mix now. It's like growing up in the 90s or when I went to Europe. Like when you're working in the kitchens, the chefs are yelling at you, and you're like, now it's like you ask someone to mop the floor, and they're looking at you like it's like I've had people walk out and they're like, "Where do you go?" And you're like, "I just asked them." They're like, "Well, you said it to them kind of rude, and you don't appreciate them." And the way you said mop the floor, I was like, "I'll mop the floor. Give me the mop." It's like Jesus. It's like you really got to walk on eggshells, and I think, coming from an old school New York background, my family's like, we love each other, but we don't really walk in always like, "Oh, I love you," and pat on the back. It's more like, we break each other's chops a little bit and we kind of laugh at it. But you really got to watch yourself now with the workforce, because you can say one thing and it's like people don't walk out. Like it doesn't matter who it is. I've never seen anything like it. It's like I've noticed this the last 5 years. People are very sensitive. You got to almost like come in, just, "You guys are doing a great job." But
give them a little back massage.
Exactly.
You're doing okay.
But by the way, there's some cigarette butts outside, and the something's caving in here. It's funny, but it's funny. Like Brandon knows me, my GM here, and he's like, if Mike's not saying anything, everything's good.
Let's talk a little bit more about your spot itself. Talk to me about kind of the setting and then some of the things you offer here.
Yeah. So as you can see, Old County, right in the middle of town. We got an awesome setting. We got our backdrop backs right up here to the rim. So it's one side of us. You have beautiful mountains. We got Old County Road and then the 87. Our main building was built here probably in the like late 70s, early 80s. Okay. So when we took it over, it was just an empty building. Nothing was there. If you ever go to our Facebook page, scroll back to the first picture, and that goes back to me just standing there with just a wood burning oven, no clue what the hell I'm gonna do. And I gutted the whole place. I'm just like, now what am I doing here? Yeah. So, but it's funny. Just when we started, the whole place was literally all dirt. So within, after the first year, we expanded the front patio. So now you can see we have a fireplace, big covered patio in the front, and that seats about 50 people, 60 out there. The inside of a restaurant's kind of small, intimate. We do have a lot of barnwood, which I think, over the years, it kind of got played out a little bit. But that barnwood actually has a story. It was taken from an old barn down in like Jake's Corner.
Oh, okay.
And it was literally a barn, like an 80-year-old barn. They took it apart. I had to pull every nail out by my hand, sand every board down. I physically put those on. And then the whole countertop in there is actually made from a juniper tree that someone actually took down, cut it for us. So kind of a lot of history. And then all the pictures and paintings inside all come from the local artists and local shops. Okay. So that was the main original building. We had the front patio. Then we built in between us. We have a nice courtyard, as you can see here. And we have Connect 4 out there. We got some bean bags, huge area. We'll have some music sometimes. And then in our tap room, this room we're sitting in right now, it's literally 400 square feet. This used to be the Chamber of Commerce for the county going back 20 years ago. So when I talked to Bill, the gentleman that I bought it back, the old owner, he was like, "You know what? The county asked me to drop this here 30-something years ago." And I said, "Yeah, that was fine." So they put it on this lot, and it's kind of not necessarily a sore spot, but it's grandfathered in. So everyone always comes in and like, "You need to make this bigger because it's only 400 square feet, right?" But the way it lays now with the zoning and all that stuff too, it's grandfathered in. We can't touch it. Just stays here. That's what it is.
Really?
But as you can see, it gets intimate. It's kind of has more of like a old school pub feel, right? So on the ceilings, I got my family's NYPD. That's my father's old police jacket. Got a ton of stuff. All these old bottles and stuff too, and those old ceramic. Those are from my basement bar when I was a kid in New York.
Wow.
And then we got pictures all of the ceilings from local artists, family stuff. And then as you can see, we definitely support our local firefighters and police department and first responders. So
Absolutely.
We have a ton of police officers and firefighters that come in here, emergency service, whatever it is, but we like to collect their patches. So the main building, we have a ton of patches there just to show our support. And then in here too, the walls are pretty much decorated with patches. So we get guys coming from everywhere, guys and girls from all over. So yeah, definitely a cool, intimate feeling in this tap room. And then on this side, it's mostly just going to be beer on tap. We have wine on tap, and then beer, wine, scotch, whiskey, bourbon collection. That's it. Keep it simple. The only cocktail we do in this room is going to be an old fashioned, but as you can see, we got a killer selection, and we do a 2-ounce pour, which is awesome, and our price is killer, as we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, well, hopefully inflation doesn't hit us too bad before this episode releases, because like you have Johnny Blue up there, and your GM was saying, I think it's like 30 something bucks a pour. So like if that is like your top of the line type of thing, and you're going down from there, and you've got, you got Johnny Walker Black, you've got Glenlivet Founders Reserve, you've got tons of really good bottles over here. It's not like you've got the biggest selection in the world, but with what you do have, you don't really need much else beyond that.
Exactly. I think 80% of what we have is our top movers, and then we'll keep other varieties in there to move. My theory when it comes to that is, we're lucky enough up here, like I said earlier, having the property and all that stuff where we don't have to charge an arm and legs. Like you go down to Phoenix, you get an ounce and a half pour, and you're going to pay, you get a drink now. It's like $20.
Yeah.
Whiskey's $30-$40. So my theory is we do a nice 2-ounce pour. Most people do an ounce and a half. Mm-hmm. So I want people to come in here, feel like they got a good deal. We make a decent living. Obviously, we keep all of our numbers in line. Our liquor cost is probably 3 or 4 points higher than the norm in Phoenix, but we make it up with having a lower rent and having the property and so forth. But another thing is I want to move the product. So if I'd rather sell 10 Johnny Walker Blues on a Saturday instead of selling 2 every 2 weeks, right? Because then it's just sitting there. It's just, it's just the margin kind of fall. It's like going back to a steakhouse. Like, everyone says you have to have a 30% food cost, but if you're selling a $40 steak and you're selling it for $60, you're still making $20 a pop instead of selling a cheeseburger for, an 80% markup, which is only going to be $6. So it kind of falls in a ratio, right? And then getting back to the question, the main building, we do have a full bar in there. So that's where we do all of our craft cocktails. And it was funny when we designed this place, coming from the food service side of it, I was like, we're going to open a place that doesn't even have a freezer, do everything's fresh. So actually we have a very small freezer that only holds gelato and maybe some chilies or something that we can only get seasonally. And that's pretty much it.
I thought you were going to say, we learned from that and went a totally different direction, but no, you're doing it all fresh.
Yeah. So we everything here at Old County is fresh. Like we don't keep too much on the shelves just for storage, but keeping everything fresh. So literally we get our orders on Mondays and Thursday. By the time Monday rolls around, we're pretty much 80%, out of stock. So we keep everything super fresh, but all of our sauces, we grate our cheese, we make our bacon in-house here, and we make our sausage. So we pride ourselves. We literally grind our sausage every 2 days. So
is it like a sausage with a casing, or is it like the kind of little like gravelly type?
Yeah,
sausage?
No casing. We do bulk sausage.
Okay.
Casing would probably be a nightmare trying to pipe it in there, and then it gets a little funky with the skin on it sometimes. So when I designed this, I didn't picture on, now we have 50 something employees between everything up here, but my thought was have a few employees dovetail, cross utilize a lot of stuff. So we bring in pork butt, and we bring in a bone in pork butt. So what we do is literally we cut the side off with the bone, and that goes in our oven every night, and we kind of do like an old school Mexican style with that. That goes over our pancho pizza. So we put them in huge roasting pans, and then you have the residual heat from the wood burning oven. So when we shut that oven off,
so it's not firing.
It's off, because those ovens will stay hot for 2 days, right? So instead of using up your gas and your power, that oven's off. So my thought was like, let's use that oven all night with the residual heat.
Yeah.
So we load it with pork butts, and we top it with cola, oranges, jalapenos, onions, seal it up. Put that in there. You walk by here at 6 a.m, all you smell is pork and cola simmering all night. And that goes on our pancho pizza, which our pancho is probably one of our top sellers. That one's going to be roast pork, green chili. We make a serrano pesto, make our house hot sauce that we call pancho sauce, and our cheese blend, and that one in our meat pie. So our meat pie, we take the other half of the pork butt, and that's what we're grinding every 2 days, and we make 60, 80 pounds of sausage. And we have our secret seasoning in there. It's, a classic kind of old school New York, little sweet vinegar in there. And then also for our meat pie, we put our house sausage. And then, most people would just buy bacon. We go through like 13, 14 pork bellies a week. So we cure our own pork belly for 2 weeks.
Wow.
Then we roast it in the oven, slice it, and dice it all by hand. So when you come up here, get our meat pie, the only thing we don't make is the pepperoni, because that would be a complete nightmare to try to do. But we do get an East Coast imported pepperoni with our house ground sausage and our homemade bacon that we dice by hand. It's just awesome. So the pancho and our meat pie are definitely the number 1 and 2 sellers.
That sounds incredible. So talk to me a little bit more about your pizzas and kind of how you make your pizzas in general, starting from the dough, if you will.
Yeah. So dough, if anyone deals with dough, it's like a whole living it's like its own organism. It's like you have to baby that thing. So, much love. I totally respect those people that don't use any starters. We do use some yeast, but we do carry over starters. So literally we're constantly using the old dough to make a new batch. Like, Caleb, much props to him up there in Flagstaff, Pizza Coletta. He doesn't even use yeast. So he'll come down to eat our pizza sometime and he's not used to eating that yeast, or, I'll eat his too. And it's a naturally leavened, but we kind of do more of an old school New York East Coast style.
So just to clarify, so when you say people using yeast, you're talking like a commercial yeast, which would speed up the process of leavening the dough, correct?
Exactly, correct.
Whereas like a natural fermentation would use just like a
starter,
which is like a sourdough starter, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's like, I assume it's some sort of bacteria combination of yeast and all that stuff. Whatever technically it is, it takes longer to produce, correct?
Yeah, you're looking at a few-day process, and you got to keep it going. You kind of constantly feed it. It's like, I would say it's like having a kid, because you can't just leave it for. So you got to make sure someone's feeding it, because some people have sourdough starters or pizza starters from 20, 30 years, which is just constantly reusing it. So we kind of use a combination. We use a starter, and then we'll add some yeast to it too. And then I always go back to, again, you're only as good as your worst employee, right? So I think it makes it a little more idiot proof. And one of the benefits by working at those food distributors, for like when I knew I was going to do pizza, like every day I was testing flours, and then, I had resources to bring in whatever flour and whatever yeast. And I kind of found, we have a locally milled from Tolleson flour that we use.
Oh, really?
And then I kind of found the batch of what worked for me. But then coming up to the mountains, it's a whole different, because you got the elevation now, right? And then the hydration with the water and stuff too.
Yeah.
So, in theory, the ones I was making in Phoenix before we opened, all right, this is the dough I'm going to use. Then you come up here and you try it, and then it's all ballooned out, all different. They're like, shit, now I got to change it up again. So to answer your question, it's, dealing with dough, it's just like a living organism. So, and then like last week it was raining, and I haven't made dough in a few weeks because I've just been running around in circles. And I came in, made dough that morning because my one girl was out that usually makes it for us. And they text me pictures like, what the hell did you do to the dough? And I'm like, damn, it was probably too hot, right? So you have to have the correct temperature. Like we know in the summer you got to put ice in it, so make sure you're temping it. And then you got to make sure your yeast is fresh too, because sometimes if you have stale yeast, that's going to affect it. But I think all those things, elevation, the water, it just all ties into it. And then up here in Pine, everything we have up here is kind of well water, right? So I think one of the benefits by being up in the mountains is something in our water that makes our pizza taste better, because I'll make that same dough in Phoenix and it just doesn't come out the same.
Sure. Which is cool, because, some people might consider this somewhat of an exaggeration, but to me, the little details like that are like the terroir of Arizona or wherever you're eating, right? Like the fact that you perfected a pizza dough down in the valley and you come up here and it doesn't work, that's where the artistry comes in, right? And of course the science as well, but you got to kind of go, okay, I'm going to start from scratch and here's what I want and how I'm going to make it all happen. And talk to me a little bit more about beyond the dough, what your pizzas look like.
Yeah, so we do use, when we first started, we were using another California tomato. So obviously everything we use is fresh. Sometimes you'll hear these pizza guys or other Italian chefs, if anyone ever tells you they're taking fresh tomatoes and making sauce, it's impossible, right? Because you can only harvest tomatoes in like July and August, right? So that's when they're peak ripeness. So to have a good, consistent product that's sweet, you got to use a canned tomato. It's impossible to take tomatoes. You'd be all over the board as far as sugar.
And they degrade quickly too.
Exactly, but you can't take a tomato in the winter. It's impossible, right?
Sure.
I hear people say that sometimes, like, there's no way you're using fresh tomatoes because it'd be impossible. So the answer to that, we were using one brand for a while, and then we switched probably 4 years now. We've been with Rob DiNapoli, and Chris Bianco is his partner on that one. So we've been using Bianco organic tomatoes from California. And for us, it's just really pure, clear tomato taste, and tomatoes are awesome. And I'm just kind of a purist, so literally we just use kosher salt, a little bit of cracked pepper, teeny bit of chili flake, and a teeny pinch of oregano in our sauce, and then fresh basil. In the summertime, we pull it from our own garden. Okay, so our pizzas, we make the dough every day, and then for the base, obviously, we're using a really good California tomato, and then we're importing Grana Padano. So when I worked in Italy, I worked in northern Italy, and when you go to Italy, everyone has their town cheese or their version of what cheese they're going to use in that
Which
region.
Would be like Parmesan.
Exactly,
things like
Parmesan, Pecorino. They're all different types of hard aged cheese. So I kind of wanted to use Grana Padano because that's what I worked with in Italy. So our blend, once again, testing around for a while, we use Wisconsin cheddar, and then I'll use a really good Wisconsin mozzarella, and then we use Grana Padano, and that's our 3 cheeses that go in there. So, but
I'll be honest, I've not heard of Grana Padano, but that might be my new favorite cheese name, because Pecorino Romano is cooler than Parmigiano Reggiano, I think. But now I've got a new favorite.
There you go. It comes in a block, and for me, it's a little sweeter. Kind of just has a little tangy, earthy taste to it. But it's just and we always get people coming in, other distributors like, hey, but we'll save you time. Use our every once in a while we'll kind of let's try something, and then after I taste it, I'm like, no, we're going to grade our own cheese. And as like when we first started, we were doing 100 pizzas a day. Then I told you this Saturday we did 362 pizzas a day.
That's crazy.
So in reality, 80% of the people would probably switch to a pre-shredded cheese and stop grating their own sausage. But one of the things that made us successful here is doing that. And we have an awesome staff now that can do that. And so I think we don't want to change too much off that, because there's you could do shortcuts, but I think what's made us successful is doing these little things. So
absolutely. Well, and one of the most devastating things on a personal level as a business owner is when your brand degrades, or when something happens that kind of reflects poorly on your brand, right? And I think something like shredding your own cheese is one of those things. Like, you taste pre-shredded cheese versus freshly shredded cheese.
Exactly.
There's not even really like a comparison. Like, nobody is going to say, oh, this pre-shredded cheese tastes better than the freshly shredded cheese.
Exactly. Because they all have an anti-caking agent.
Exactly.
In there, which is kind of a starch where some guys like it, but I think once you start growing too big, like you have 4, 5, 6 locations, unless you have some huge commissary, it's going to be hard to keep it up. So, for us, it works. So we use our California tomatoes, make our fresh dough. We have our 3 cheeses that go in there, grind our own meats, do all that stuff. And I think that's what you taste when you eat the freshness in Old County. And, don't get me wrong. Like, it's just like last week it was raining. I had one of my customers like, there's something wrong with the dough. It didn't poof. And I'm like, we take criticism. I told the guy, I was like, hey, I made the dough myself, and I probably temped it too hot, and it's raining out, and it just didn't puff. So we'll come in and throw away 15 bins of dough if it don't approve. So,
well, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with having pre-shredded cheese on, right? But people are expecting a kind of, like, intuitively, they're not thinking, oh, this has pre-shredded cheese on it, right? But it has a different kind of vibe, and I think that permeates throughout a restaurant. And to see not only from your beer tap list, which has Wren House, it has several local beers. I believe I see an Arizona Stronghold Cab, which is one of my favorite Arizona wines, and you even have like wine on tap, which is a really cool thing that a lot of places don't have. I think kind of the level of quality runs consistent throughout your business, which is why when I showed up at whatever it is, 1 p.m. on a Wednesday, it was packed.
Yeah.
It was absolutely packed, and I can't imagine what this place is like on a weekend, especially when you got Roger Klein playing over on the stage you got set up.
Yeah, like any given, you come here in the summertime, not to toot our horn, but it's like some days it's funny because if you've ever worked in the restaurant business, like say Friday, you come in the tap room, maybe you have a bourbon, you want to sleep in, you roll in Saturday, you're making your dough, and then you start seeing that crowd form, and you're just like, some days, we're all in there, we open at 11, we almost put little barricades up because you start seeing the line grow and grow. And then just, Saturday mornings and summer, we're just all like, we got the music going, you're getting pumped up and you're looking out the door and you see a big line. You're just like, oh shit, time to roll today. But it's funny. It's great. It gives you a lot of adrenaline to do it. And, I think during COVID was definitely really challenging, where I think we probably could have broke down and started using pre-shredded cheese because you couldn't find labor, right? You got to admit, we were all having labor issues, because a lot of people just didn't want to go to work, and they're scared to come to work, calling out sick all the time. But now, knock on wood, we got a really good staff here, and we've been able to build a great team. One of the benefits, too, being back up here like 2 years ago, I did add 401k. We have health insurance now.
Wow,
so
that's awesome.
We're definitely putting back. It's like, even my broker that I deal with, he's like, you're probably one of the only small businesses I know that now offer 401k and health insurance. And it gets expensive. Like I just did payroll. I was looking at payroll reports before this, and you're like, oof, that's a lot of money coming out. But, and that's one of the things going back. I think if I was in Phoenix and I'm paying $20,000 a month at some strip mall, I wouldn't be able to afford it. You couldn't offer my employees what we do here. So it's nice doing that. But we've been blessed where I remember the first day we opened was my wife and I. She took off from her job for a few weeks. We had like 4 or 5 of us. Brandon, my original GM, he was with me too. And, we're thinking we're going to do 10 pizzas, and cars started coming in. We've been blessed to be busy since then. And, I think what keeps us going is number one, our staff, awesome. I couldn't do it without them because as we're growing, I got a ton of stuff going on. I finally had a kid 4 years ago. Like I'm in my 40s now and I have a 4-year-old. So I'm trying to be a dad, juggle that whole thing and my wife's businesses. But yeah, so we've been blessed and we're busy every weekend. And this weekend, like you said, we're setting up, we're having the first time ever having something this big up here, where we're having Roger Klein and the Peacemakers play on the Saturday with a couple of we have Jim Bachman and the Day Drinkers and Austin Sweeney playing, and then Bobby Joe Bell playing after that.
That is awesome.
So Saturday's gonna be awesome, and you can see we have a huge stage set up and fencing coming tomorrow. But this weekend will be a true test to see how this all pans out.
So I think, unfortunately, by the time this episode comes out, that event will have passed. But just a quick little note, follow Old County Inn on social media. We've got an upcoming article in A Taste of AZ magazine, so make sure you're following them and staying in touch in that way so that next time you guys do something like this, if all goes well and you have a good experience with it, when you do it again, people can come along for the journey.
Do remember, we are closed Mondays and Tuesdays. We get people that come up all the time. And, back to then, as a business decision, it was one of those things where we all work 5 days. Mm-hmm. Everyone gets 2 days off. Even Labor Day, if something lands on a Monday, I still close. I always tell people we're like racehorses. You can only run. You can't run a racehorse. That's hard. The legs come off, the wheels break. So it's like.
Well, and I wanted to make the note too, because, we talk to a lot of people similar to you in the respect that they're not only shredding their own cheese as an analogy or a metaphor, if you will, but they are shredding the cheese out of your bank account to create that 401k and whatnot, if you will accept that representation of it. But I make that joke because, taking those extra steps is more than just something for the customers, and it's more than just something for the employees. But like, if you want to come into a place and get a pizza and be able to have staff here, those are the little touches that you can do that kind of create the different flavors of business operations and how people run things that, I would imagine that people are saying, the opportunity to have this 401k and the things that they're doing for me. I don't want to go to work today, but it gives them that extra little push. And I think that's something that on a small business scale, while, there are sacrifices that have to be made by owners like yourself, this perspective of, small business owners are rich and all these things that are exploiting people and whatnot. Some people have that perspective, and I think that places like this are, about as good of an example as you can get as the beauty of small business and working in this industry and the sacrifices that you're willing to make to kind of push that forward to your employees. And then ultimately, if someone's happier working here, they're going to give a better experience for the customer as well.
Exactly. And you could ask any of the employees to a point, I'm almost like too crazy when it comes to people. I'll jump in, I'll scoop the rock, I'll wash the dishes, I'll pick up cigarette butts off the floor.
That's leading by example, though.
Yeah, I can't even imagine trying to blows my mind. Like when I was younger, I'd work. I don't even know how they do it. I actually admire them because I'm like, I wish I was the guy walking around in like a nice suit. And
sure, yeah,
people
yeah.
like, you open a restaurant and the guy's walking around in like a nice three-piece suit or nice clothes and this and that. But it's like, most days, you're wearing chef shoes and pants because you're in there raking, picking up, washing dishes. It depends on the day, but you really got to jump in there and do all the jobs. So.
Well, and so you said one other thing. You said if I have worked in the food industry before, I would kind of know what it's like when a crowd is welling on a Friday night or a Saturday or something like that. I have not worked in the food industry before, and I don't know that I can fully appreciate what it's like to operate it, but I do greatly, greatly appreciate it. So for someone like me that has not worked in the food industry before, talk a little bit about what it's like when you have that crowd welling. What are you feeling inside? And when you are in like the depths of that line, you're halfway through it maybe, and you don't have an end in sight too soon. What is that like to kind of rally yourself and your team and crush out 300 pizzas in a day?
It's funny. I'll get into that question, but I have Beth was hired on as my assistant, or sometimes my wife will come up and help us on the weekends. Just one note: if you've never worked in a restaurant, I think you should work in a restaurant for one day before you yelp anyone, because like there's people that worked for they've did like more of an assistant type work, help me with back paperwork, and then they'll come help us on a Friday. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much stuff and everyone's yelling at you and all this stuff going on. And then you get people yelping. It's like, I think before you yelp anyone, go work at a restaurant for like 2 days and just feel
unless
like
you have nothing but good to say, right?
Yeah, because you're actually just my theory is just like, don't go back or call them up or shoot them an email.
Sure.
But sometimes it just drives you nuts. So get into that, but it's like, it's definitely the adrenaline thing. It's like going back to sometimes I don't even know if I could live without it, right? Because some days my wife's like, what are you going to do when you retire? And it's like you thrive off the adrenaline. So even like what Brandon was saying, like I can't even picture you going home and sitting down watching TV because like I thrive off of that chaos and all that stuff. And I've been doing it my whole life. So, there's nothing like when we open on Saturday, we're all in there prepping. You know, our team, someone brings donuts. You got to have the coffee in the morning, and we got music playing. You peek out the window and you see a line of 30, 40 people. You know, it gets your adrenaline going. It's definitely that team feeling, and we're all working. You could tell when you're in here on a Saturday, and then most of us have been around with each other. We're like a big family here. Like we do team outings and we have parties together, but you could definitely feel it when we're in sync. Everyone's helping each other, and you know, it's just that whole adrenaline. And then when we're on that line and we're cranking pizzas, you got to see how small our kitchen is. And you know, I got Jamie and our crew back there is awesome. She's leading the kitchen, and but there's 5 or 6 of them back there cramped in this little open kitchen. And if you've ever worked in any kitchen, it's like that. Like every movement, it's like, you know, it's like dancing, right? So you're like,
my home kitchen is probably like a massive kitchen to most chefs, and I've seen plenty of kitchens to know that it is, you know, the size of a decent sized kitchen as far as a commercial operation would be, and the amount, like how quickly I run out of counter space and everything is covered in pasta sauce or whatever I'm working on at the time. I've heard the phrase, you know, talked about it's like a dance working in a kitchen, and it definitely seems like that. And it almost seems like, you know, when you have a good crew that has worked together for a while, it is choreographed in a way that, you know, people are sliding behind and they're communicating. Maybe it's a tap on the shoulder to let them know
behind you, Bert. It's like, yeah. And then, but when it's all done at the end of the night, it's, you know, that's when you kind of calm down. You're like, yeah, Brandon will send out numbers. Good job, team. We hit 360 pizzas and all-time sales. Like, we thought after COVID, you know, COVID was a horrible thing that happened to the whole industry and the whole world, but to be honest, up here, we were up numbers. It was our busiest. We were up 20%. Wow. It was crazy. We were packed every weekend. And we were thinking this year, there's no way we're going to be up. And we're still up, you know, 7% from last year. So if you look at our numbers, it's since day one, most people say you got a 3-4 year life and then you're going to balance out. So knock on wood, we're still growing here at Old County, but it's been good. But, you know, you can't beat it. It's like a family atmosphere. So we all treat each other. Most of the time, you know, you'll see some days I'll be out back, you know, yelling at someone or something goes on, but at the end of the night, we all hug and make up. It's like a big dysfunctional family, right?
Sure. Well, and it must be pretty functional, at least, to be whipping out the level of pizzas that you guys are doing, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So talk to me about, you know, you mentioned you sometimes have a line of 30 plus people out here. What is kind of like the optimal way to enjoy Old County Inn? Like, how is the best way for people to come enjoy? Is there a pizza that you recommend, maybe a cocktail or a beer, or just notes that you would kind of give people for a great way to enjoy an experience here and maybe Pine in general?
Yeah, we always say you're living on Pine time when you come up here. So one of the things, if you're coming up here, just definitely in the summertime, because our busy season's June, July, August, right? So just be patient with us. You know, a lot of times we are short staff. So you know, if you come in on a Saturday, you're probably going to be here for an hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes, but enjoy the scenery. Typically we'll have live music outside, unless ABSCAPs listen to me or BMI. But anyway, I'm sure everyone else deals with those guys. But
when that part comes up in the podcast, it's just going to go beep.
Beep. Yeah, and they're only playing original music, by the way, too. But.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Right.
But come up, enjoy the outside. You know, we got bean bags for the kids. We even have chickens out at the end of the property. So a lot of kids will sit out there and play with the birds and feed them and so forth. But, you know, when you definitely come up, get one of our craft cocktails, enjoy the scenery, talk to our local crowd here, because like I'd say 60% of our employees and I mean our customers that are here are local too. And you'll find, you know, you'll sit down with someone, you start talking to them, and you make a friend. And I can't tell you how many people have actually bought homes up here because they say Old County. They came up here, they weren't sure if they wanted to buy. Came to Old County, had the best time in the tap room, and wind up buying a house. So
you guys are basically single-handedly to blame for the increase in housing prices that I'll never be able to afford something.
Exactly.
Up here, huh? Yeah.
If I was smart, I would have probably bought like 10 houses. But yeah.
Next time you open a pizza shop, you're going to buy all the surrounding property and the one that it's in. So when you guys are making delicious pizza and the neighborhood explodes, you've got that appreciation.
I'm going to build the Pine Projects, and I'm going to put an Old County right in the middle.
That's perfect. That's perfect. No, I mean, I might be your first buyer on that one.
I am from Staten Island, so we're used to the projects. We could definitely put them around and put a little Old County in the middle. But no, just when you come up, enjoy the cocktails, talk to the staff, just relax. You know, we try our best to pump everything out. But for the most part, it's like, you know, I'm not going to lie, it's going to take a while because we do everything from scratch, right? And then we get busy on the weekends. But the best day to come up here is on a Thursday or Sunday night. Aren't too crazy. Wednesdays is kind of our local night. But, you know, otherwise, you know, you come in, enjoy the pizzas. And we make a bunch of other things on the menu. Like our green chili beer cheese is one of the top sellers.
Wow.
We've been using a Grand Canyon Amber Ale since day one with that one.
Okay.
Shoot out to my John Peasley I'm friends with from Grand Canyon Brewery. But
Nice.
anyway, so we've been using his beer, and we add all of our cheeses in there with that beer, and it's green chilies, and we serve it with like 5 to 7 breadsticks, and that stuff sells like crack. Like everyone comes in and they just order the beer cheese, right? And then we do a Chicks and Picks, which is our hand-breaded chicken. We make our own pickles in-house, make our own hot sauce. And don't call it ranch. We call it buttermilk herb here. So we make our own buttermilk herb dressing.
Okay.
And you got to, it's kind of a joke too. And
Sure.
I hear ranch. It's like, no, it's buttermilk herb. It's funny.
Are a lot of people ordering ranch for pizza?
Yes. Yeah. And we do charge 50 cents because we make it from scratch. So just don't yell at me about charging 50 cents.
No, I'm kidding.
No, we use buttermilk, mayo. The price of mayo is crazy now. It's like, it's like $50 for a tub. But anyhow, the Chicks and Picks is a killer seller, and then our meat and cheese. I used to call it charcuterie board, but no one could say the word.
Yeah.
Charcuterie, and they butcher it. So now it's just basic meat and cheese for all you simple folk. And it's we put our house-made bacon on there.
Okay.
I found this Mormon cheese ball. It was in a recipe book from like 10 years ago, and that's what's on the. It's in the center of it. It's like a chip beef.
And you make it here.
We make it here. Yeah,
Okay.
It's cream cheese, chip beef, scallions. Black olives in there,
Wow.
Worcestershire sauce, and a couple of things in there.
That's even harder than charcuterie to pronounce,
Yes,
right?
I just say Worcester sauce, whatever it is, and then or lean parents, you could say. And then we make our house pickles on there, and then we actually put our house bacon, sopressata, and then we do a mostarda, which is like a spicy mustard with raisins in there, and that's a huge seller too. And then we do a couple different appetizers. Our buffalo chips, we take Kennebec potatoes, slice those to order, and then our wings. So our wings is like a whole process. I used to go down to JT's Bar and Grill down there. So if he's listening, JT's passed away, but I kind of got the idea from there because we take our wings, we toss them in our sauce, and then it's a whole project so we make our pickles here in house. So we'll take our pickle brine that's left over, we brine our wings for 2 days, take them out of there, then we roast them in the wood burning oven. And then when you get an order, we're going to fry them, toss them in our house poncho sauce, then we grill them. So it's a whole process that goes with them. But I kind of got the ideas when I was sitting at JT's Bar, which is still down there on Indian School. And I was like, we're going to do that, but elevate it. We're going to use our pickled brine and all that good stuff. So, and we serve a whole wing. So it's like it's a double joint with the little tip on it.
Oh, okay.
That's how wings
call
go.
me pretentious, but like a soggy, not crispy wing just doesn't do it for me. But a crispy wing with some good sauce, that's on a new level.
Yeah.
Especially if it's got a little smoke flavor going on.
Yep, ours are definitely crispy to the point where they get dark sometimes, but that's the crunch, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's for me, like, I don't really want to eat a chicken wing if it isn't like that. So now I'm going to order some chicken wings.
Got to get some wings. Yep, I'll tell them make sure they're crispy.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like you kind of know the place, and like if it's like a pizza shop that's more of like a chain, it's not really going to be crispy when you get it. It's going to be like really no crisp at all. The opposite of crisp is how I would best describe it. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to just trying some pizzas and getting another local beer as well, because you got plenty of them on here.
I have to try a whiskey too.
Yeah, absolutely. The $30 whatever it is, even a $40 pour Johnny Blue is a good opportunity for me to.
Now you got me thinking. I got to raise Brandon. We got to raise the price.
Yeah, right. If they do raise the price, I apologize to everyone for that happening. But no. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with people, just about stuff that you have going on? Anything else beyond that?
Yeah, so we do have a tavern down the street that's Pinewood Tavern. That's basic burgers, fish and chips. It's just more of a kind of like your neighborhood bar. Mm-hmm. And we serve typical tavern fare in there, right? You go in there, get you good burgers. We do have wings down there too, and then we just opened Pine Provisions down the street, and that's our retail bottle shop. So in that store, we'll probably 80% focused more on wine, but we have a ton of craft beer in there. And literally every week we're adding different varietals of wine, and we keep adding beer. It's almost like we have beer ADD lately, because it's like every week we're ordering something else. We're kind of trying to figure out where we're going on that, but it's a really cool little retail shop. We do the charcuterie boards and stuff in there, and then sell a lot of specialty stuff. So if you are coming up on the weekend and, not to toot our horn, but our prices are actually better than the Valley.
Really?
Once again, going back to the thing, I'd rather sell product than get greedy. You can't, we just opened it up like 2 months ago. A lot of people come in and like, damn, your bottles of wine here are, great selection and better price than the Valley. A lot of people bring their stuff up. So no need for that anymore. You could just pop into Pine Provisions. We are open now over there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for now.
Okay.
And then eventually we'll try to get back open some other days. But for now, just with staff, and that's like the bulk of our business.
Well, and if you like to enjoy a drink on your travels, which I surely do, that's got to be part of the itinerary, right? Is like, where do we go when we need to pick up a bottle or some beers to bring back after dinner? That is like a crucial part of a well-executed trip, in my opinion. So it's good to know that that's a good spot. We'll definitely have to set up a podcast and another one and talk a little bit about your other spots for sure. But thank you so much, man, for sitting down with us. We do have an article on you guys coming out in our fall issue, our October issue, written by the legendary Wizard of Zaw, Steven Larson. This is one of his favorite spots, and you guys were actually mentioned in the must-try pizza spots in our inaugural issue. So kind of a full circle moment for us as well.
He's been great to us since day one. It's like when he first came up here, most people think like you're paying someone for advertising, but we didn't realize, like, our first couple of years, we kept getting a lot of notoriety, and then he came up and had our pizza, gave us really good write-up. So we definitely appreciate it. And, we did advertise with you guys last last magazine that came out. So definitely appreciate the support on that. But no, Steve's been great. So.
Well, and
yes, I want that job. I want to go around and eat pizza and do podcasts.
Big shout out to Steven. If you are not following him, check out Wizard of Zaw on Instagram. If you liked this interview or pizza in general, or really food, because he goes to other spots, does some beer stuff as well, you got to follow Steven. Wonderful dude, writer for the magazine. Shout out to all of our writers, really. And once again, thank you so much for sitting down and making time, and I'll let you go scoop some rocks now.
Thank you.
Because I'm sure you're looking more forward to that, right?
Yeah, I got a lot of setting up to do for this week, but we're fine. And then, thanks, guys, and then we'll see you here at the Old County Inn, Pine, Arizona. Thank you.
Absolutely. Cheers.